Gardner Thomas of the League of Women Voters of Saratoga County, and I will be your moderator tonight. We want to thank the Lake George School District for arranging for the use of this auditorium tonight. The League is a nonpartisan, volunteer, political organization dedicated to the informed and responsible participation of citizens in government. The League never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. That has been the League policy since our founding in 1919. Membership is open to anyone who is eligible to register and vote, whether male or female. I realize that many of the people in the audience tonight might be fiercely partisan. However, I will insist that the candidates and the audience treat each other with respect. I also ask the audience to hold its applause until the candidates finish their closing statements. The job of the audience is to listen and to ask questions. We'll be taking oral questions this evening, but we are asking audience members to write out their questions in advance. You may use the forms that are provided this evening. Please announce your name and if you live in District 21. Questions should take no more than 30 seconds to read. Most questions should be directed to both of the candidates that are present this evening. However, if a question is directed to one candidate, the other candidates may respond as well. And know that we probably will not have time for all of the questions that you may have. We're thinking that we're going to end maybe about 8:15, something like that. Questions should be clear without preambles and should contain no personal attacks or inappropriate language. Candidates are asked not to distribute campaign literature, but it has been placed on the table out in the auditorium there, out in the foyer. Candidates and audience, remember that this is not an event for campaigning, so I see you've already complied. There's no hats, pins, signs, or demonstrations that are allowed inside or outside the school building. Timers for this evening's event are in the front row. Please raise your hands. They will hold up cards for the candidates to glance at. Green means 1 minute left, yellow means 30 seconds. And red means time's up. And I'll be trying to keep my eye on that too. The candidates for Congressional District 21 on your ballot on November 6th in alphabetical order are Tedra Cobb, who's running on the Democratic, Working Families, and Women's Equality Party lines, and Dr. Lynn Kahn, who is running on the Green Party line. And then, not present this evening, but definitely running, the incumbent Elise Stefanik, who's running on the Republican, Conservative, Independence, and Reform Party lines. Ms. Stefanik declined our invitation to attend. She was offered the opportunity to submit an opening statement, but we have not received one. Now it's time to hear the 2-minute opening statements from the candidates. They drew lots, and Dr. Kahn will start.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. I was born in the Bronx, which is this working? Yes. All right. I was born in the Bronx, which is one of the boroughs of New York City, and mostly grew up in a small town north of the city called Hartsdale, where I went to this incredible public school, Ardsley High School, which in many ways saved my life. When I was a kid, my dad used to take us up north to get away from the city. And we came up here every summer for 2 weeks. Sometimes it was the Adirondacks, sometimes the Catskills, sometimes the Finger Lakes, but it was always go north. This is where I learned what clean air smells like, what clean water tastes like, what it means to hear quiet and hear nature and be able to think for myself. My earliest memories are sitting on a pier with my dad fishing for sunfish, I think. It was a big deal coming up here. My dad and his brother, my mom and her two sisters grew up in the same orphanage, one of New York City's orphan asylums. So not only do I understand poverty, I really understand growing up in a way that you don't know what to ask, you don't know what you don't know. So I think that I have been motivated my entire life to figure out how things work, how people work, and how to make improvements. So of course I went into psychology. My PhD is in clinical psychology. My area of expertise is group dynamics, but instead of doing group therapy or family therapy, I went into government agencies to improve them, which was an amazing experience over 32 years. So I've worked inside the federal government as a psychologist for 32 years, 22 years at the Federal Aviation Administration, 6.5 years in the White House Partnership to Reinvent Government. And I hope that you'll hear in the answers to my questions more about how to drive solutions to complicated problems.
Thank you very much. And now we'll hear from Tedra Cobb.
Thank you so much for letting us be here tonight, and thank you, Dr. Kahn, for being here with me tonight. I'm Tedra Cobb, and the 21st Congressional District isn't just some area on a map for me. It's made me who I am. It's been my home for over 30 years. I came to the area, to SUNY Potsdam, as a student. I got married and raised a family. I started my own business, and I served for 8 years in the St. Lawrence County Legislature as a mom, a firefighter, an AIDS educator, and a healthcare activist. I know and I love the people of New York 21 and Northern New York. We stand at a fork in the road. We can choose to stick with the incumbent and wait and see if she decides to vote in our interest, or we can forge our own path and choose our own future. I say we act. Elise Stefanik must be replaced because she votes in ways that harm us. And the only way I can figure out why she does this is because of the money, the corporate interests, and the lobbyist money that drives her. I want you to know that I will be accountable to you, and only you. I look forward to tonight's questions. I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope we have a great conversation tonight. Thank you so very much.
Okay. We're now up to the time for questions from the audience. I'd like, if you have a question, if you would line up over there along that wall, and Linda will send you up. And since you're first, you can come right up here to the microphone. Hi, it's working.
Hi, my name is Diana Klemenkowski. I am from Greenfield Center, New York, and I am definitely, obviously, a member of District 21. Here's my question, and this has been bothering me for a very long time. Is there anything you can do, and would you do, to help the Native Americans in our state?
Okay, and the first person to respond will be Tedra Cobb.
Thank you so much for the question. I happen to live on the northern part of the district, where Akwesasne is part of the district. And so when I was a St. Lawrence County legislator, we actually worked on the land claims. And so one of the things that I've done as a candidate is meet with economic developers on the reservation, on the native land, and actually connect them with people who are working on some issues to help with economic development there. Many, many years ago when I did HIV and AIDS work, I worked on the reservation training people to do HIV and AIDS test counseling. So for me, part of where I am in the district is reaching out to Akwesasne and making connections there, and also meeting people throughout the district who might have connections to Native issues and healthcare, mental health, economic development, food security, economic independence. Those are the things that I think are high on the priority list, and the things that I hope to continue to work with my friends and neighbors on the northern end of the district, but also throughout the district. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Oh, I did, yes, sorry.
I have been to Akwesasne more than a few times. Driving through initially a bunch of months ago, I met with some folks on the St. Regis Mohawk Reservation that were very concerned about environmental issues, and as the Green Party candidate, it was kind of a natural fit. Three things I would say about the conversations that I've had. First of all, they have been hurt by the contamination and the damage that occurred in that area because of the manufacturing in the Messina area. So we've talked a lot about remediation and how to deal with those kinds of environmental contaminations. There are a lot of, especially the young folks up there, that really want to look at what we're starting to call green energy manufacturing along the St. Lawrence. I'll talk more about that later. So there's amazing opportunities for economic development, especially harnessing the power of the St. Lawrence River related to hydrogen fuel production, which I was surprised that many of them are really supporting moving sustainable energy in that direction. And we've been working together to create statements and make proposals. The last thing I want to say is one of the concerns that I've heard the most is the lack of respect when they go across the border, because the St. Regis Mohawk have both American and Canadian citizenship. So, and many of them live on Cornwall Island, which is in the middle of the St. Lawrence River. And when they go back and forth, the lack of respect by border controls is incredibly offensive.
But what would you do to correct that problem?
Day one, a total stand down of the border control, demand that they read treaties and rules and laws that say the Mohawk are free to come back and forth as they wish. They do not have to be questioned. And another issue is civil forfeiture. They're getting their property, their cars, and money that they carry seized, and they don't get it back in a reasonable time, and sometimes they don't get it back at all. So it has to do with day one standing up and saying, this is how it is. Stop doing the crazy stuff that you're doing for the Border Patrol.
Thank you. Thank you. I realize that I forgot to let the audience know that the candidates have 1.5 minutes to respond to a question, and they also have red cards that they can use if they need to extend their remarks for another 1.5 minutes, or like either on that thing, or if they want to respond to something that their opponent has said. Okay, the next question.
Hello, my name is Joyce. I live in Wilton, near District 21. And there's no way this question is going to be answered in 1.5 minutes, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Because this question is more of a national type of question. You'll be representing our district, I know that, but you also, and it's for both of you, will be responsible for a lot of decisions on a national level as well. So my question is a national focused question. It's very complicated. Given Trump's threats today to close the southern border totally, if Mexico does not stop the, quote, caravans coming to the border, how would you address this issue? And I realize it's a very complex, but your
Okay, thank you.
thoughts.
That's the question, I think. Dr. Kahn, you want to go first?
Thank you. I actually believe that Congress will look tremendously different after this election. I pray that it'll look tremendously different. So there might be an opportunity for more of a pushback against those policies. I do believe that I'm especially concerned about people that have family here and what the threats are doing to folks that are hiding out and afraid to come forward for a lot of reasons. I do think that we have to honestly look at who's coming across the border, and it turns out it's mostly people and families and young folks that are fleeing poverty, war, conflict, gangs. And we, as a nation, have to have the conversation. What does it mean to be American? What does it mean that we need folks that are coming across the border for jobs that are available? And make the distinction between people that are coming here for asylum, which is one large group, and most of the people that are in those caravans, and those that are coming here and are violent drug runners, because there are issues related to violence. Most of the people that are trying to come here for asylum, which is legal and constitutional, we need to have a conversation about how many folks we want inside this nation, and do so with compassion, which has been sadly missing in the federal response to what's going on at our borders.
Okay, thank you. And Tedra Cobb.
Yeah, this question is about the southern border, and I think there are larger issues about immigration, but I'd like to answer that one first. And that is when. And I don't mean flip by that, but we must win to take back the House, to push back on this administration. At no time have we had this kind of negative behavior toward people who are fleeing their countries in danger coming into this country, or separating families. And so I think that's the first and foremost. But I think the other thing is we have to stand up to human rights abuses, not only in those other countries, but in our own country. And separating families, I think, is a human rights abuse. I think that we overarching need to pass a clean DACA bill. I think those who are here with temporary protected status should have a clean path to citizenship. These are human rights, and I believe that these are values that we have in northern New York, but I think that we share with people on the southern border. So you asked, as a congressperson, what would I do? And that is work with my colleagues and start passing laws that this Congress could have and should have passed to protect people who are here legally and who are abiding by the law, and to set precedents so that people who can, who do come here and flee for safety have the ability to live here and follow our laws and be supported.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next questioner.
Hi, my name is Carolyn, and I live in Thurman, in the district. My question for each of you is I would like you to share your thoughts about the rising federal deficit and the associated Republican plan to cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security.
And Tedra, you'll be first.
So first and foremost, despite the hype, the Social Security Trust Fund is solvent and can be if we raise the cap and if we make it more fair. So first, I will do everything in my power to secure our social contract with each other and keep Social Security and Medicare safe from being raided and being privatized. I think it's important to remember that Elise Stefanik worked for the Republicans as their policy director in 2012. And she wrote the plan to privatize Social Security and Medicare to create a voucher system. I'm in this race for many reasons: healthcare, the environment, Social Security, Medicare. These are the social contracts that we have with each other and that I will fight for. Now, the question you asked about deficit, and it's a question, the answer is priorities. Do we give the richest among us a tax break while we cut Social Security and Medicare? And the simple answer is no.
Thank you. Okay, next questioner. Nope. Oh, God, I'm sorry.
my time, sorry. I worked inside government for 32 years as an organizational psychologist. I worked for 22 years at the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, which is the gold standard for excellent acquisition, contracting, management of our taxpayer dollars. When I went to the White House Partnership to Reinvent Government, I was astonished to see how poorly most government departments spend our money. So part of why I'm in this race is because I was appalled at the waste of money. I will never vote to raise taxes. I don't buy the myth that we have to cut social services to pay for a deficit that is related to a tax cut for billionaires and multimillionaires. I am so clear that the waste of dollars inside federal government, which I think is $1 trillion, could fund infrastructure improvements, universal health care, what we need to do to reclaim the damage done to our environment. For example, the Federal General Accountability Office just came out and said there's $178 billion worth of waste just in the duplication of programs. That means we have 47 different job training programs in 9 different agencies, and they all spend a budget. None of them are coordinated. Even the Department of Defense said they had $125 billion of waste inside the Department of Defense, and that report was buried.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Pierre Herman in the 21st District.
You want to get a little closer to the mic?
Okay. Over the past year, what have you learned about New York 21 residents and your campaign volunteers?
Dr. Kahn?
Well, I was here last winter when it was 29 degrees below zero. So one thing that I learned about where I live in Screen Lake in Essex County, Tony came and plowed my driveway on Christmas morning. 2 days later, when it was snowing again, the fuel truck came. A young man down the road came by on his snowmobile to make sure I was okay. So what I have found and adore about the North Country is that sense of community among the folks who live here and how important it is to watch out for each other. Among my volunteers, many of whom are here tonight, thank you, I've learned that there is an enormous amount of frustration among voters in this district and in the country about what we perceive to be a very broken two-party system. Politics is broken, government is broken, and the volunteers that are coming to work for the Green Party are incredibly energized about a third choice and a third way, and voting for someone outside that corporate bought and sold two-party system. And that's been really powerful for me.
Thank you. Tedra Cobb?
I've learned that we are more alike in this district than we are different. I'm from the northern end of the district, and what I love about Washington County is that I feel like I'm at home when I'm there. We have the same farming issues, we have the same healthcare issues throughout the district, we have tourism on the St. Lawrence River, on Lake Champlain, Lake George. We have to clean up parts of the Hudson and the St. Lawrence River. We have the same environmental issues, the same issues of tourism and of seasonal employment and farming. So in terms of as a candidate and meeting with people, I feel like the unity of the district is something that Elise Stefanik hasn't been able to harness and use in our favor and advocate for us. As for the now 1,900 volunteers, I've learned that we are a passionate bunch and that people are creative and people are driven by the things that are important to them. And as kind of the leader of that bunch, if somebody says, I want to do something, I say, okay, go for it and do it. And so I look at signs that are being made or letters that are being written or knocking on doors. Sometimes I get handwritten letters. And to me, it's about the passion of who we are And that's what I've learned from people, and that we truly care for each other. And that is not that we are just Democrat or Republican, but we are of all party persuasions, and many are no party.
Thank you.
My name is Marilyn.
Just step it up.
I'm tall and shrinking. For both of you, what message or messages would you like to emphasize in the last few weeks of the campaign here?
Tedra Cobb first.
Sure. The message that I have had from the beginning is that I will run this campaign with integrity and grit, and that I am running as an extension of who I am. I have lived here for 30 years. Like I said in my opening, I've been a firefighter, but I've also served on many boards, healthcare boards. I cared for my mother with hospice and served on the hospice board. So the message is that this is an extension, and being your congressperson is an extension of my life's work and who I am, and also my extent, being a legislator in the past. There is nothing that would give me more honor to serve you as a public servant. And so I think that's the message. And I really think it's also important that I have stayed true to my values and will continue to do so not only as a candidate, but as a congressperson. That I am beholden to you. The people in this district have funded the campaign, have volunteered on the campaign. So this is maybe a little long message, but it really, I want you to know who I am and why I'm here. And lastly, I have said this along the campaign trail. The person who sits here today will be the person who was here for a town hall in a few months. I will not change.
Thank you. Lynn Kahn.
Thank you. I'm going to tell a little story. So my message is we can do this together. Even though people are fighting and often in very hateful and vindictive ways, I do believe that a third-party candidate can weave together differences to create a path and a roadmap for solutions. And the story I want to tell is about an article that I wrote, and it's published, it's out there, with a woman who's a staunch Republican and does not believe in climate change and does not believe that humans are causing global warming. And in this article, she had her set of facts, I had my set of facts, she had her concerns, I had my concerns, and they didn't match at all. But when we got to the level of vision, we had a full dramatic agreement. And the vision, and this is around climate change from people who have two very different points of view, the vision is that we are the shepherds of our shared planet and our shared home, and we better take care of it. And once we agreed on the vision, then we could go to really specific actions. And it didn't matter what her belief system was, because we agreed on the actions. And the first action was we have to hold people, companies, government agencies, including the military, accountable for the damage that they have done to our environment, including our water systems. So the first action had to do with accountability. The second action had to do with I think I'll use my minute and a half, right?
Okay.
Is that what I get, a minute and a half? My little red card? So the second action was in a natural disaster, and we know that we're getting more and more of them. Our response has to be directed and focused on the people who are being hurt. It has to be a people-to-people kind of actions and policies. And even if government agencies are helping or community-based groups are helping, we have to make sure that everything is oriented to the people that have been damaged and hurt. And the third action, there are like 7 actions. The third action was really focusing on how do we build the partnerships so that we can make the right kinds of decisions and have the right kind of conversations. We need to be rethinking building homes in flood zones. We need to be rethinking building houses where there have been mudslides because the land has been devastated by fires. and we need to push our government agencies to work in that direction, which I will do when I am elected as your official. I can't see that. Do I get 30 seconds?
30 seconds.
So my last 30 seconds, my message is, we might be hateful and angry with each other, but when you get to the level of vision, there's a lot that we have in common. And then once you agree on a vision, you can actually identify very specific actions that will move our nation forward, including District 21.
Okay, thank you very much. That was just a cue for me to not use the mic so much.
Hi,
Hello.
my name is Valerie Epstein. I'm a resident of Queensbury, and my question has to do with the AUMF. It's Congress's responsibility to declare war. The last time the AUMF was invoked was in 2012 when we invaded Iraq. Since that time, we have continued to invade several countries, both under the George Bush administration, the Obama administration, and now the Trump administration, and we are currently bombing in 7 countries. This week, 2,000 troops were deployed from Fort Drum to Afghanistan, and there still appears to be no clear goal to end the war in Afghanistan, which has now gone on for 17 years.
Okay, do you want to?
My question is, how will you, as a congressperson, if you're elected, take back the power of Congress to make sure that Congress is the one that is making these decisions? And secondly,
No, that's enough. You know, because you went on and on with the preamble that...
I'm just going to ask how they would represent Fort Drum, based on your answer.
Thank you.
And, Lynn Kahn.
Okay, so the AUMF is an authorization for the use of military force. This Congress and the last 3, current administration and the last 2, have been violating the Constitution of the United States because there is no official declaration of war, which is a function of Congress. There are some proposed pieces of legislation out there that are calling for an authorization for the use of military force. It's part of Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. It is one of the reasons that I decided to run. This runaway push and driving all of us towards war, and right now I'm concerned that that might include nuclear war, is absolutely the most unethical, illegal, and clearly unconstitutional actions that this Congress has taken, including the incumbent. There is proposed legislation that would demand hearings for a declaration of war, and I would support that legislation. And the folks that I've talked to, I was endorsed by Veterans in Politics International because I've had a lot of conversations with veterans and wounded warriors, and their rage about why we keep sending our sons and daughters off to wars that do not have to be fought is, you can feel it, it's palpable. This is one of the most important day 1 actions that I will take. And it's time to stop what's going on.
Thank you. Kahn.
Yeah, I agree more or less with Dr. Kahn. We need to hold hearings, and we need to decide whether to rescind allowing this government. How will we hold the president accountable and the role of Congress? And so I agree with Dr. Kahn on that. So I'm not going to use my time to talk about that because I think she said it quite well. But I would like to talk a little bit about Fort Drum, because I think a lot of people on this side of the district don't know much about Fort Drum. Fort Drum is the only military base that is fully integrated into the community. In other words, it does not have its own hospitals, it does not have its own schools. And I've lived in the North Country during the expansion of Fort Drum, when 801 housing, so from Jefferson County all the way to Lewis and St. Lawrence County. Fort Drum is very much a part of our community, And not just the people who are troops, but the people who are the families and the federal workforce. And so, as a congressperson, there's an opportunity to continue to support Fort Drum and work with the troops and their families and also veterans. And I think that despite Elise Stefanik's rhetoric, she has been absent in the community. She may visit Fort Drum, but she's absent in the community.
Okay. Thank you. Try to get to the question.
Try to get quicker?
No,
I think this will need a microphone. I'll kind of step away from it. My name's Rod Johnson. I live in Lake Luzerne. I had to rephrase my question to make it a question for both candidates, but it's mainly for Dr. Kahn. Given the historic importance of the 2018 midterm election, would you consider withdrawing and throwing the Green Party support behind Tedra Cobb? And to make it a question for both candidates, would Mrs. Cobb accept the support?
Oh, please.
Okay, Tedra Cobb is the first person to respond.
Well, that'll be interesting.
Mostly all I can say is I'm going to go back to the mission, and that is I'm running with integrity and grit. My goal is to win and to replace Elise Stefanik. So thank you.
Dr. Kahn.
Number one, the biggest voting bloc in District 21 and all of New York is did not vote. Number two, 15% of America believe in our government being able to deliver on what it is that we want, 15%. So I think the Republicans and Democrats are splitting the 15% that actually believe government can do something good, and I'm going for the other 85%. If you had talked to as many veterans and wounded warriors as I have about the damage that uncontrollable warfare and the powers of the military-industrial complex have brought to this nation and the Fort Drum area and all of our veterans, you would know that I am proud to run as a Green and I'm in it to win it. If you have talked to as many dairy farmers in this district as I have, about how Democratic and Republican legislation has meant that for years and years and years, the price of milk is set below the cost of production. So they are losing money and their farms every single time a milk truck leaves their dairy. If you had talked to the parents and the young folks that are devastated and terrified about what we're doing to our planet and our water systems and our air and our food, you would know that I stand for green values, and it's Republicans and Democrats that are making the wrong decisions. I'm in it to win it.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Hi, my name is Sean. I live right down the road in Glens Falls, New York. I just wanted to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event so I can learn more about the candidates. But my question is, on a national level, since you'll be in Congress, how will you protect the rights of the LGBT community in this area as well as throughout the country?
Okay, Lynn Kahn first.
It's a human rights issue. Either you understand what it is that we as Americans have in common, our love of liberty, our respect for justice, our hope for justice, because I think a lot of people feel like justice is not well served in our nation these days. We are Americans. We are a diverse community. We are a growing nation that only generates excitement and energy by being a diverse community. So I think I've been called a government mechanic. I know how to look under the hood of government. So part of these protections is not just like the Justice Department doing what they're supposed to be doing, but it's what's going on inside every single government agency. And so you have to look at what's going on in education, in healthcare, in housing. It's part of what's going on inside every government agency. And what I learned doing the work that I was doing in aviation and that I then brought to criminal justice reform, you also need to have some kind of a structure that brings together people from different agencies to talk about how we are moving forward regarding human rights. And it's connected, it's all connected, right? Government is a living system, we're a living system, it's all connected. So it's not just LGBTQ community, it's also what's happening to people of color, it's what's happening to women, it's what's happening to young girls, it's all connected.
Thank you. Tedra Cobb?
Yeah. The role of Congress is to pass laws that help all of us and secure all of us so that we're equal, whether it's marriage equality or whether it's, I did HIV and AIDS many years ago when people lost their health care, were kicked out of their homes, hospitals wouldn't treat people with HIV and AIDS, so we passed laws to protect people. That's what we do. That's what we do in Congress. So the things that we need to do is make sure that any healthcare law includes people who are straight or gay, and of whatever persuasion, that our mental health system is fair and just, that our adoption system and foster care system, that our marriage laws and that our retirement system. So in other words, all of us must have the same access to our family and raising a family and living in a just world. And that's the role of Congress. I take it seriously. I took it seriously when I lived in St. Lawrence County and I fought for marriage equality with my community, and I will continue to do so as a congressperson, and work with states to make sure that states are abiding as well. The role of a congressperson is, as well, is to work with our states and our state representatives to work on laws and to support each other and make sure that we are protecting all of our citizens.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Hello, I'm Jackie McConnell with the League of Women Voters, and I'm asking a question on behalf of Ellen McPhillips, who is back there. This is regarding health insurance. I am interested in what you all are going to do about providing health insurance if elected. I have progressive MS and am on Medicare. My code are through a former employer and soon. Since I have a pre-existing condition and my drugs cost over $64,000 a year, what are your ideas on helping people in situations like me?
Okay. Tedra Cobb?
I'm in this race because of health care. That's the long and short of it. Elise Stefanik voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act without a replacement. She has, kicking 64,000 of our friends and neighbors off of their health care. She has taken money from pharmaceutical companies, from insurance companies, and so first and foremost, the policy for me is to never take a dime from those companies so that I can represent each and every one of you. First. Secondly, we must have portable and affordable health care. Now, I know that there are many plans out there, Medicare for All, or a Medicare expansion, or the expansion of the Affordable Care Act. To me, at this point, it does not matter which product it is. It's the vision and the mission and the value and the principle that every single one of us must have portable and affordable health care. And I will work on that as I have done my professional career working in HIV and AIDS, running a community health agency, helping to start a federally qualified health center in my community. Working for healthcare has been my life's passion, and I will continue to do so in Congress. And the last thing is making sure that pharmaceutical companies are held accountable and that we are able to negotiate drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. And there's a little more there, but my time's up.
Okay, Dr. Kahn?
I've done my homework and I've issued a statement. I've written several articles, you can Google, it's out there. I have stated that I believe in universal health care, access to high quality, low cost or free health care, the full range of services, dental, vision, and a full range of mental health services included in, of course, basic physical health. I have read the Medicare for All legislation. First my eyes glazed over, but I did go back to it. And I think that's the best vehicle right now to move us towards a vision of universal health care with my 8 amendments to that piece of legislation. And the first amendment is to clarify the purpose. As written, it's just another insurance system put in place so that government pays for health care and mental health services. I want to clarify that piece of legislation so that it includes the statements that the purpose is to expand health care, reduce costs, and improve health outcomes. Improving health outcomes is rarely included in any of the health care legislation. My second amendment had to do with the cost of medication. Did you know that the last 210 drugs that were approved for marketing were based on federal research? Our tax dollars went to pay for that research. I'm going to use my other minute and a half.
Okay.
All right, so our tax dollars went for that research, and the pharmaceutical companies got all the benefit. I have called for a NASA for medicine so that we start developing taxpayer-owned medication. And given what's happening to our healthcare system related to climate change, maybe we could start with a cure for Lyme disease, which is growing worse and starting to move up. I've also talked about, there's an act called the Bayh-Dole Act, which says that if a medication is not being made available in a reasonable way at a reasonable cost, the federal government, the agency that funded the original research, can march in and move that patent and that license to somebody else who will deliver that medication at a more reasonable cost. We absolutely have to look at, and I would support every single piece of legislation that lowers the cost or eliminates costs for medication. That includes negotiating prices, making it easier for generic drugs to come into this country, changing the laws and the rules of the agencies that make it harder for us to create and develop and market generic drugs and generic substitutions. There are lots of pieces of legislation that are proposed that are already out there and that talk about lowering the cost, but because I think Republicans and Democrats can't get past hating each other, that legislation doesn't move forward. So I am on the record, Medicare for All is a path towards universal health care with my 8 amendments.
Thank you. You can come on up, but I do notice that we have one person in line who has already asked a question. So if there is anybody else who wants to ask a question and get in front of the last person in the line, if you haven't asked a question, do that.
I'm Ben Lapham from Glens Falls, and my question is, what are your 5 specific policy initiatives that you'd work to implement or champion?
And the first person would be you, Lynn Kahn.
Okay, all right. Number 1, I've made this promise to more than a few veterans groups, and my number 1 proposed policy and piece of legislation I would support is to totally reinvent the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. There are some great medical facilities in the VA, but overall it is a failure. There's 100 medical facilities, VA facilities under criminal investigation, so I have a whole set of pieces that I would propose and support, because there is proposed legislation out there related to reinventing the Veterans Administration. And my second one is dairy farmers. I've been endorsed by Farm Women United because I understand that our government policy sets the price of dairy milk below what it costs to produce that milk. So legislative hearings on that. Legislative hearings and supporting and bringing forward the proposed ideas and policies that will totally rethink what we're doing to our environment, especially our water. We are poisoning the water, and we need to have full disclosure, including for military installations. And we need to, I know this is wonky, but we need to reinvent how we make these decisions so that we're dealing with classes of chemicals, like the PFAS family of chemicals, instead of doing onesies and twosies. There's like 5,000 of them. We have to regulate them as a class. I would support the authorization for the use of military force and congressional hearings, and I'll leave my fifth one for a closing statement.
Okay, good. Tedra.
Okay, so to me, the values drive, or the principles drive the policies. So the last question was about healthcare, and so healthcare, portable and affordable healthcare, and access to mental health, access to drug and alcohol treatment that is embedded in the community. So first and foremost, healthcare. The problem is when people ask for specific legislation, what Congress should do is hold hearings. And what Congress hasn't done on healthcare and solve the problem is to hold hearings. So to me, it's working on the issue, but the solution isn't one policy, it's finding the policy solution. But beyond that is to ensure that the Clean Power Plan and moving into the environment is secure. The Farm Bill cut, the Conservation Stewardship Program, that has to make sure that we've got money in the Conservation Stewardship Program. I'm going very quickly. I would pass the Scientific Integrity Act, which allows the EPA to be free from control of people who want to push science or their thoughts, so separating science, allowing scientists to do what they do. And lastly, working on education, making sure that we have not only subsidized loans, but that programs like TRIOS and other programs for low-income students are available and accessible. I don't know if you know, but Elise Stefanik co-authored or co-sponsored the Prosper Act, which takes $15 billion out of education. I'll just use my card because I'm having a good time up here. So those are some of the things. If we look at student loans, it's also expanding Title I so that students in education have access despite, no matter what their ability is. Teacher training in Title II, making sure that Title IX is protecting males and females and our students in college campuses. I could go on about educational policies that are important. And the last thing is this. We have a gun violence epidemic in this country. We need to ban bump stocks. We need to have universal background checks with no loopholes. We need to make sure that domestic violence laws are expanded, and we need to make sure that people who are at fear for themselves or a family member are able to have red flag laws and can go to a judge for protection. We can protect our Second Amendment rights while also protecting our communities, but this Congress has done nothing. So those are some of the policies, and I'm sure if I had a few more minutes, I could come up with some more. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Andy McAdoo. While I am not currently a resident of District 21, I am a lifelong resident of the North Country. I was born and raised in a dairy farm in St. Lawrence County, so I think I have credentials. I have seen activism in the North Country like never before, following, over the last 2 years.
Do you have a question?
Yes. I really have two questions. Could you talk about what you've experienced in some of that activism, and also could you, talk about some of the concerns of having two progressive candidates with similar ideas split the vote, and that would end up resulting in the change not happening that we all want to see? Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Tedra Cobb first.
I think I'm first, and I would say that I think Dr. Kahn and I agree on many things, but I also think we disagree on, I think what Dr. Kahn has said is that we are hateful, and that we don't work together. Yes, you did, I wrote it down. So I have found that people are not hateful. I have found that the rhetoric coming from this country's leadership does not reflect our values, that doesn't reflect the values of the people in this district. It doesn't reflect Republican values, or Democratic values, or Green values, or independent voters' values, or conservative values. I find that people in this district are not only fiercely independent, but also that we care for each other. And so for me, what I've experienced in terms of activism is that people want a voice, but people want a voice, and that comes out of compassion, and that comes out of listening to each other, and not division. So that is what I've learned. And what I hope is that I have proven myself to be a strong candidate and a strong advocate, and that I will get 50 plus 1 and not split the ticket, but win.
Kahn.
I believe what I said is that Democrats and Republicans in Washington, D.C. can't get past hating each other to get anything done, and that rhetoric in Washington has become hateful and vindictive. Of course, I love living here. It has nothing to do with people that are here. It's about what's going on in our broken political system. I understand why my opponent wants to take my words out of context. The activism that I've seen here is phenomenal, and a lot of it has to do, it's like in different communities in some ways. So I see veterans becoming more active, especially around anti-war issues. I see the dairy farmers becoming more active about having their voice heard, and I do think that in the last few months that dairy farmers' voices around how they have been pushed into bankruptcy has become clearer. I think both political parties are actually trying to attack each other for not solving this problem, which has been going on for a long time. I found out that the largest cooperative dairy co-op in New England in their last mailing sent out information about suicide hotlines, because that's how bad that problem is in our dairy community and in our small towns that depend on farming and small farms and dairy farms. I've seen a lot of activism related to, in some ways, true fear about what it is that we're doing to our environment.
Thank you.
I would like to say I'm sorry that if I twisted your words.
And I would like to say that we're not going to let any more people line up to ask any other questions.
Hi, Robin Barkenhagen from Glens Falls. I'd like to know, why do you think Elise Stefanik is not here today?
You go first, Lynn.
I think the Republicans and Democratic institutional leadership is running scared. And I think that's why she didn't want to show up. I think she's not comfortable facing an audience, and that's why she's not here. I want to add to some of the things that I was saying before, since I have another minute to this. I think that we're out of time. We're just out of time. It is 0 hour. It's 0 hour for what we're doing to our environment. It's 0 hour for how much pain there is in so many communities around farming, and especially veterans. We're out of time. And it isn't just that a congressional representative passes laws. You have to understand how the agencies implement those laws. And you have to be able to look under the hood of government to figure out why we're wasting $1 trillion a year, why we're not able to solve basic problems of universal health care, why we keep going off to wars that we do not have to fight. And it's both parts. It's both the legislation and what gets implemented. And we don't have time to fool around with this. That UN report, the United Nations report, said that we have 12 years to totally change how we are treating the environment, or we're going to be leaving our children and grandchildren a world that is at war, and a world that is not livable or barely livable. People are nervous. I came up on the train the other day. I was talking to a woman sitting next to me who was reading about the UN report. She burst into tears. We are out of time.
The question was, why is Elise Stefanik not here tonight?
Why do you think that she's not here?
Well, I have no idea why she's not here. I have no idea why she doesn't come to the district. I have no idea why she would invite the Speaker of the House and not bring him to the district to meet her constituents, whom she should be so proud of and so happy to introduce him to. It's a pattern of behavior that Elise Stefanik has shown over her 4-year tenure, and it is one that I'm hoping we will hold her accountable to when we vote not to replace her. So for me, the honor of being a congressperson is to be here not only tonight, but to be here regularly. This is my home, you are my community, and it would be an honor to serve you, and I cannot figure out why it is not her honor.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Antine-Miller from Glens Falls, and thank you to the League of Women Voters, and thanks to both of you for joining us tonight. I'm going to actually ask the antithesis to that question. Can you name one or a few things that you respect about your Republican opponent and our president?
Well, Tedra, Cobb.
You're welcome.
I've had this answer or question before, mostly about the president. I think there are a lot of people, and you can raise your hands. Is this election cycle the first time you've been politically active? Worked on a campaign, gone door to door, knocked on doors, gotten petitions, called people? How many people this is your first time? So not so bad. You know, the reality, and I think if we had a full room, I'd say there would probably be more people. I think one of the things that this president has done is, you know, awakened this country and gotten people to start paying attention. Every election matters, whether it's local or state or federal. With regard to Elise Stefanik, I have never met Elise Stefanik. Well, I guess once at a milking contest. I think she got more milk than we did. But I really, you know, it's a hard question when you don't know somebody. And so, you know, I think that I can't speak to her as a person, especially after a summer of being attacked by her. That's, you know, I find that, you know, it's hard to step away, you know, hard to step away from, you know, who the person is and who I want as a representative.
Thank you. Okay. Lynn.
Donald Trump. What do I respect about Donald Trump? Is that the question? I think he got one or two things right when he was campaigning. He certainly got that people were really angry. And he didn't understand how much pain was under that anger, but he did make sure that we all understood that level of rage in this country. I think he helped us all see that this supposed divide between urban and rural was really destructive for our nation. And people in the cities do not understand people who live in the mountains of rural America. And it's all part, you know, we all have to work together. It's all part of our nation. And I think we've learned that we really have to look at the consequences of legislation for people who do not live in urban centers. The woman that I wrote that article with about climate change, and we didn't agree, and she was a staunch Republican, she made me go to a Donald Trump rally at an airport in Florida. So what I respect is his ability to communicate. We really need to learn from that. And it's really straightforward. It's one line, two lines at a time, one or two lines at a time. He really understands his base. He knows what the applause lines are. I learned a lot about communication listening to him. Around Elise Stefanik, I'll do that another time. I find out it's
Hello, my name is Michael. I'm from Glens Falls here. And my question for both of you. The House of Representatives, it currently has 21 committees that members can serve on. And I realize that first-term members, which you both of you don't have seniority necessarily, but if it were up to you, which 2 or 3 committees would you be most interested in serving on, where you feel you might have the greatest impact?
And Lynn Kahn first.
I only want to be on one committee, and that's oversight and government reform, because that's where I can hold every single agency accountable for waste, for dysfunction, for doing what nobody wants them to do, and not doing what it is that we all are hopeful that they will do. So I think that's the one for me, because I've worked so long on government transformation in a lot of different areas. I think the Congress, next Congress is going to be dramatically different. I'm actually hoping that I'm hoping that we can actually even talk about reinventing the U.S. House of Representatives and that committee structure, which doesn't allow anything to get done. I'm also hoping that we can think through other ways to caucus, and instead of Republican or Democrat caucus, really caucus around issues. So I want a war on waste caucus, because that's how we're going to pay for what it is that we want done, including universal health care and including all the infrastructure changes that need to happen to respond to climate change. I want a caucus around universal health care and how we're going to deal with health issues related to climate change. And again, it has to be a coordinated, all-of-government approach. So I've written 3 books, 2 books about government reform. My first book was called Peacemaking. I really understand how government agencies have to work together, and I hope that the new Congress will allow some of those ideas to flourish.
So first and foremost, I think for me, education in the workforce, just professionally for me, and also I think it's important in this district, given the number of universities that we have in the district. I keep counting, and I think it's 13, but I always feel like I'm missing a university. So if you know if there's 14 and I'm missing one, let me know. But as a professional since 2003, I've had my own consulting business, and I work with not-for-profit, for-profit universities on strategic planning and development work. So it's a good fit for me. In terms of fit for the district, agriculture, veterans, armed services, I think having a person from this district on one of those committees is crucially important. You may not know this, but the largest single-site employer in New York State is Fort Drum. So it really is, it's not just about troops. People think about that in terms of Fort Drum, but in terms of employment in the community, as I spoke earlier, really crucially important, and I think having a voice on that is very important, or veterans, and obviously agriculture. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. This is the very last question.
Hi, it's me again, Diana Clementowski.
You have to move the microphone down.
Oh my God. Me again, Diana Clementowski. Okay, this is a quick question. As we know, we have not had any kind of contact at all with Ms. Stefanik. So will either and or both of you promise that we'll have, regular town halls consistently and make yourself available, or at least, in some way accessible to us, your constituents?
Okay, and the first person for that would be Tedra Cobb.
Yeah, so over a year ago when I started with the promise that I would hold 12 town halls a year in 12 counties. After a year of being on the road, that seems so small. It seems few town halls, so few. So for me, the mission of a congressperson is to know her constituents, and the only way to do that is to be in the community. So the answer easily is yes, and I find that that's, first and foremost, the honor of being able to serve people is to know them, to know what your hopes and issues are, and to work with you to solve the problems that you face and all of us face in the district. And you can't do that if you're not here.
And Lynn?
I have over 30 years experience designing and facilitating town hall meetings. I love this stuff. A design I would prefer is more interactive, really posing questions and kind of either voting or having small group conversations so that we move to agreement on specific issues. I designed and facilitated a 1,000-person town hall meeting on violence for the city of Cleveland, Ohio. We had everybody divided up into groups of 10, sitting at 10 at a table, and each group had one specific issue to create a short-term, mid-term, and long-term action plan. And we put them all together for a citywide plan for reducing crime and violence. I've done hundreds, probably, of town hall meetings from 5 people to 700 and 800 people in justice reform, probation reform, homeless services. As aviation was moving from ground-based radar to satellite-based communication, navigation, and surveillance, I had and designed and facilitated town hall meetings that brought together agencies, airports, airlines, manufacturers, and representatives of the flying public. I'm a psychologist. My PhD is in clinical psychology, and my area of expertise is group dynamics. So I really love listening to what people are saying individually, but also figuring out what that design is so a group can arrive at consensus and feed that into solutions.
Thank you.
Yes, right. That's a yes, right?
I've committed in writing to two town halls a month. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, it's now time for the closing statements, and the candidates have only 1 minute to make their closing pitch. And we're going to start with Lynn Kahn.
My closing pitch. I worked inside government for 32 years. I know how I've been called a government mechanic. I understand the legislative side. I understand the executive side. I have respect for the third branch, the judiciary. I have respect for freedom of the press. I understand that. I know how to drive solutions to complicated problems. I've been doing that for more than 30 years. And I want to do that and would be honored to do that in the context of being the first Green Party member of the United States House of Representatives. I live here. I've had my house here for 15 years. I came up here every year as a kid. I'm a single mom. I brought my son up here for years. I want to help bring this community together and make sure the resources that are spent in this nation are fairly spent in rural America, including District 21. I'm proud to run as a Green. I believe that most people in this nation think the two-party system is broken, and only a third way, an independent Green, can help move us in the right direction.
Thank you very much. There you go, Tedra.
All right. I want to say thank you again to the League of Women Voters for letting us be here and for organizing tonight. And thank you, Lynn, for being here again. Lynn and I are getting used to just being on the road together sometimes without Elise Stefanik. So I want to say, thank you for hosting us together. I'm really here sitting in this chair because of you, of so many of you. Over a year ago when I announced there were a handful of us together, and I knew I had to run this race like a local race. Meeting people, building a team, creating a community, and that's why I'm here. We have done that. We've got 1,900 volunteers. We won a primary with almost 57% of the vote in a 5-way race. We have momentum, but that momentum is about our shared vision for the district. This isn't about me, it's about us, and it's about having a congressperson who cares about us, and I'm hoping that you will choose me to be that congressperson. I would be honored, and again, I thank you so much for letting us be here tonight.
Thank you to the candidates and to everybody in the audience for demonstrating your civic concern by coming here tonight. Don't forget that the candidates have literature on the tables out in the back, and the league also has some upcoming events. We want to remind you, which I doubt you can forget, to vote on Tuesday, November 6th. The polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., so no discrimination against rural areas in this election. Will you join me in applauding these candidates?